Chosen one, I need you to hear something that will change how you see every attack launched against you. This is the real version, the systematic slandering of your character, bullying and gang stalking has been seen and is being investigated by those with the authority to end it. You were open. You were trusting in a way that felt natural because it was natural. It was your nature. You loved generously. You felt everything deeply. When someone arrived with warmth, you met that warmth. When someone presented themselves as safe, you allowed them to be safe. That was not naivety. That was a gift, a rare, costly, extraordinary gift that most people spend their entire lives trying to recover after the world strips it from them. But even then, underneath all of that openness, you were more than you appeared. There was a quiet power in you that you had not yet fully claimed. You had a knowing that sometimes came before the facts arrived. You could read a person or a room in a way you did not yet fully trust, because you had not yet understood that this ability was something to be used, not dismissed. You felt the energy a person carried before their words reached you. You knew when something was wrong before you could name the reason, and you kept overriding that knowing because you wanted to be wrong. Because the alternative meant that the people around you were not who they said they were, and that was a weight you were not yet ready to carry. They chose the wrong person, they just did not know it yet, and honestly, neither did you. You were not being watched casually, the way someone glances at a person they admire and then returns to their own life. You were being studied, obsessively and quietly. Every move you made was being measured against your observer's own standing. Every area where you were advancing was being tracked by someone who needed you to stay still. And the more you grew, the more something dark began building in the people watching you. Something that had no name spoken out loud, but had a very specific shape in behavior. Jealousy does not announce itself. It never walks up and says, "I resent what you are becoming because I am afraid I cannot match it." Jealousy dresses itself in other things. It comes wearing the face of concern, of humor, of friendship. It sits right beside you and asks how you are doing, and behind that question, it is always calculating how to pull you back down to a level that does not threaten the person doing the watching. You were not competing with anyone, you were simply living. You were becoming more independent, more self-sufficient, and more anchored in a sense of your own worth that required nothing from their approval. That quality, the quality of someone who has stopped needing external permission to know who they are, is the thing that makes a certain kind of person lose their composure entirely. What you need to understand is this: a controlling person cannot control what does not need them. And control from the very beginning was always the real objective, so a campaign was organized, and what was organized was not ordinary gossip between hurt people. It was deliberate, sustained, coordinated defamation, the active construction of a false story about your character, circulated with the specific intention of destroying your credibility, your relationships, and your sense of yourself. The moment that coordination crossed from private bitterness into organized action against a single individual, it entered territory that carries a legal name. Remember that, because the investigation currently underway began exactly at that line. Every operation like this requires someone on the inside, someone close enough to do the real damage. In your situation, that person existed. Someone arrived wearing the face of everything you needed. A protector, a safe place, a person who seemed to understand you in the specific way that only happens when someone has been paying very close attention. You opened up to this person. Of course you did. You gave access to the parts of yourself that you do not give easily. You were honest. You were present. You trusted this person with the real version of you. What you need to know now, and this is going to land hard, is that their arrival was not accidental. This person was placed. What felt like fortunate timing, like genuine chemistry, like the right connection at the right moment, was in fact engineered. Someone who knew enough about you to understand what you were looking for had designed the encounter to feel exactly the way it felt. The actual role assigned to this person was not to love you. The actual role was to destabilize you, to generate conflict that could be reported back, to press on the bruised places so that your reactions could be catalogued and used against you in conversations happening far outside your awareness, and to frame you, in the story being told externally, as the problem, the volatile one, the difficult one, the one who could not be trusted and deserved whatever came next. And while all of that was happening in your face, something else was happening behind your back. Information about you, your private responses, your emotional reactions, your vulnerabilities was being passed to the people who wanted it. Access to your most intimate life was being funneled back to people who should never have had any proximity to it at all. That pipeline is now being traced, and every communication that moved through it has been preserved as part of the picture that official eyes are currently assembling. If this message aligned with your purpose, hype this video so fellow chosen ones can find their confirmation. Eventually your body started telling you that something was wrong, not through evidence, not through proof, but through that full body knowing that you carry and spent so long ignoring. You started pulling back. You went quieter. You occupied a different energy in the relationship, and the moment that happened, the performance became impossible to sustain. A person running a scripted role cannot continue that role when the subject of the script becomes unreachable. You stopped giving reactions, you stopped providing material, and without material the mission collapsed. That is when the warmth evaporated. That is when the person who had been playing a protector became your most vocal accuser. The story went out first, to anyone who would listen, before you even knew a story was being told. That is the standard behavior of someone who needs to control public perception before accountability arrives. But in this case, accountability had already been set in motion, and no amount of preemptive storytelling stops what is already moving. You walked away. You did it without a speech, without a public defense, without a retaliation campaign, and without descending to the level of what was being directed at you. You simply moved forward, and while you were moving, the attacks continued. Insults, fabrications, coordinated attempts to shake you, to get you to respond, to get you to hand over something that could be used against you, and you gave them nothing. Some people who watched this did not understand your silence. Some people in the opposition read your silence as an absence of defense, as confirmation that the story being told about you was true. But the people watching without a personal investment in the outcome, the people observing the full dynamic from the outside, saw something entirely different. They saw you moving through your life with composure and consistency, and they saw a coordinated group consuming itself with the effort to disturb that composure. The contrast between those two images does not require narration. It speaks loudly on its own. You are someone who feels deeply. Conflict does not just drain you, it takes up residence in your body. You absorb other people's anger as though it were your own. Getting into an open war with people operating from that level of organized malice would not simply have been exhausting. It would have caused genuine damage to you in ways that had nothing to do with the public-facing drama. Your instinct to protect your peace was not weakness dressed up as wisdom, it was actual wisdom, and its strategic value became clear only in hindsight, when it turned out that the only documented behavior in the record belonged entirely to the people who were attacking you. The entire operation against you depended on your participation. The people running it needed you inside the conflict with them. They needed you reacting in ways that could be screenshotted, shared, and reinterpreted. Without your reaction, their material dried up. Without fresh material, maintaining the momentum of the group required constant performance from the person at the center, who had to keep manufacturing new outrage, new grievances, and new reasons for everyone to stay focused on you. That kind of sustained performance is exhausting and unsustainable, and it inevitably becomes visible to people outside the circle who eventually ask the right question: why is this much energy still being directed at someone who has clearly moved on? When the right person asks that question, the investigation begins to take shape. Chosen ones, they never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it. Chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice, and now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse-engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine, and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster, synchronicities stack, your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play, that's all. For $1, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. What was built against you connects to something older, something that runs further back than the recent attacks, further back than the person who was placed in your life, further back than the group that formed against you. It connects to people who were supposed to represent your foundation, people whose role was to show you what safety and love looked like before you went out into the world and looked for those things in other places. Some of what was done to you began there. It began inside the walls that should have been your first experience of security. And it was subtle, which is precisely what made it so effective and so difficult to identify for so long. It was never loud or dramatic. It was calibrated, designed to keep you just uncertain enough about your own worth that you would keep looking outward for confirmation of it. It was designed to make genuine independence feel dangerous, and to make your own growth feel at some level like a violation of an unspoken rule, even though you could never name what that rule was. The people who organized against you were not operating in isolation from that older structure. The person placed in your life was not simply running a private agenda. There were connections reaching back to people with a specific investment in keeping you in a particular position in life. Information about your private world, your reactions, your emotional state, your vulnerabilities was being shared with people who should never have had access to any of it. And when your independence became undeniable, when your growth stopped being something that could be quietly managed, the attacks escalated. A fully self-possessed version of you was a version that could not be leveraged, could not be kept small, and could not be controlled without your consent. You stopped consenting, and that was the moment the entire operation intensified. What no one inside that structure ever understood is that you cannot permanently suppress what was built to rise. Every obstacle placed in front of your becoming only extended your preparation. Every attempt to stunt your growth only deepened your roots. Every person sent to destabilize you only sharpened your discernment. You spent years navigating debris that should never have been placed in your path. And what that navigation built in you is a capability that cannot be purchased, imitated, or taken away. There is one more thing about the defamation specifically that you need to sit with. The particular lies chosen to tell about you were not random. Every false claim made about your character was aimed precisely at the quality in you that most threatened the people behind it. You were called unstable because your emotional depth made the people attacking you feel shallow by comparison. You were called difficult because your boundaries made them feel powerless. You were painted as the aggressor because your self-sufficiency removed the leverage they had always relied on. Every accusation was a mirror held up to their own fear, and that mirror is now being reviewed by people who know exactly how to read what it reflects. At some point, and the exact timing matters less than the fact that it happened, someone started paying attention who was not aligned with the people who came against you, someone with no personal stake in the outcome, someone who was not looking for you specifically, but who in the course of investigating something else entirely found a pattern that had your name at the center of it. Your name appeared in that pattern not as someone who had done something wrong, but as a consistent, sustained target. Investigators do not build cases from emotion or personal allegiance. They build cases from patterns. They look for behavior that repeats across contexts and over time. They look for coordination that has no innocent explanation. They look for the signature of organized action directed at a private individual. And that signature, when it exists, is distinctly different from the noise of ordinary conflict. What was done to you carries that signature everywhere it was applied, because the people doing it were confident enough to be careless. They believed the size of their group made them invisible. In reality, the size of their group is exactly what made them visible. More participants means more communications. More communications means more records, and more records means a clearer picture for anyone who knows how to assemble one. You need to understand what gang stalking actually looks like to an outside observer, because it looks nothing like what the people doing it believe it looks like. From the outside, what is visible is this: one person moving through life calmly and consistently, while a coordinated group expends enormous resources to monitor, undermine and damage that person. The asymmetry of that picture is not subtle. It raises questions immediately. Why is so much effort being directed at someone who appears to be living peacefully and without provocation? What is at stake for the people directing that effort? What are they protecting, concealing, or afraid of? Those questions are now being answered by people who have both the authority and the access to find the answers. And then there is the financial dimension. There is almost always a financial dimension in situations that escalate to this level, and your situation is no exception. Something involving resources was done in connection with your name, something structured in a way that benefited someone at your direct expense. That specific element is what moves the situation from the category of interpersonal cruelty into the category that official bodies have the statutory power to investigate and prosecute. It is the anchor, and once the anchor is in hand, everything connected to it comes under the same scrutiny. Whatever story you may have heard about them moving on, being unbothered, or having closed this chapter, that story is a performance. Something has shifted in the atmosphere around them, and the confidence has developed fractures. Conversations that used to center on what to do to you have become conversations about how to cover what has already been done. The group that felt powerful is beginning to feel like a liability, because frightened people do not maintain loyalty. Frightened people assess their own exposure and start making decisions that prioritize their personal safety over collective allegiance. Some of them have already had conversations with people asking pointed, specific questions. Those conversations communicated without saying it directly that homework has been done, and in response, some of them lied, confidently, verifiably, and in ways that flatly contradict the available evidence. Here is what lying at that stage of an investigation actually accomplishes. It compounds the original problem. It takes what might have been addressable and adds obstruction on top of it. Every false denial creates an additional layer of exposure on top of the original act. The attempts to delete evidence carry their own signature. When account histories are wiped, when posts and communications disappear, when someone's online activity suddenly becomes a blank wall after a long period of documented behavior, that absence is not invisible to a forensics professional. That absence is a record of its own. It communicates that someone knew what was there and understood that it needed to disappear. Knowing something needs to disappear is consciousness of guilt, and consciousness of guilt is part of what gets documented when a case is being built. You do not need to do anything to accelerate this process. The acceleration is already happening from inside the group itself. As confidence collapses, each person inside that circle begins generating new evidence of the operation through their own desperate attempts to manage the exposure. There is something that exists completely apart from what is happening in any official proceeding, something that lives in the territory of your own clarity and what it costs the people who could not destroy it. Your growth is visible, your peace is visible, your self-possession, your boundaries, and the absolute absence of the collapse they were working toward. All of it is visible, and the people who invested so heavily in your destruction are now watching you become exactly the person their entire operation was designed to prevent. That is not a small thing to absorb. It requires a level of ongoing internal justification that gets harder to sustain with every day that passes, and you are still standing, still building, still becoming more of what you were always supposed to be. The obsession with your name, the continued need to tell the story again, to bring you up in rooms where your name does not belong, to monitor what you are doing and with whom, is not the behavior of people who have moved on. You already know this. People who are genuinely finished with a chapter stop devoting emotional and mental resources to it. The fact that your name is still being spoken, that your movements are still being tracked, that the campaign has not simply disbanded now that you are no longer present in their immediate world, all of that is the admission. The obsession is the confession, and that confession tells the most honest story about who actually holds the power in this situation. You moved on. The people who targeted you could not. That asymmetry is not a minor detail, it is the entire summary. Every false claim made about your character, to every person in your orbit, creates a paper trail of the claimant's own dishonesty. Each person who received the manufactured story is a potential witness to who was doing the manufacturing. Every platform used to spread the false narrative is a potential record. Every embellishment added, every invented detail, every claim designed to sound credible while being factually empty, all of it becomes measurable against the actual evidence. Your silence throughout all of it is not a weakness in that accounting. Your silence is your strongest asset. The only public record that exists of your behavior during this entire period is behavior that is calm, consistent, and impossible to weaponize. The only public record of their behavior is a sustained, escalating campaign directed at someone who never once struck back. That contrast, seen by objective eyes, requires no interpretation. You are different now. You are not harder in a way that closes you off, but sharper in a way that protects you. You can read the structure of a manipulation before it fully assembles. You recognize the warmth that arrives too quickly, the agreement that costs nothing, the person who understands you with a precision that only happens when someone has studied you rather than genuinely known you. That discernment is not suspicion dressed up as wisdom. It is earned intelligence, the product of having lived through something real while staying alert enough to extract the lesson from it. Your boundaries are not what they used to be. Before, a boundary was something you negotiated, apologized for, or softened to make others comfortable. Now a boundary is a fact. It is the simple, non-negotiable reality of where your life begins and where access to it ends. People who enter your world now encounter someone who knows exactly what is acceptable and what is not, and who requires no external validation of that knowing. That quality, the bone-deep certainty of a person who is genuinely unbothered by the possibility of disappointing someone who does not belong in their life, is the most powerful thing you can carry into any room. And you carry it now, because the pressure burned away everything that used to stand in its way. Your relationship with your own instincts is also different now. The knowing that was always present, the one you spent years overriding because the implications were too uncomfortable to face, you do not override it anymore. You listen to it first. You move when it says to move. You hold still when it says to hold still. You end things when it says a thing is finished. You have built an unshakable relationship with the most reliable instrument you have ever been given, and that instrument was not sharpened during the easy seasons of your life. It was forged in exactly the kind of sustained, organized pressure you just survived. They aimed at what they believed was your weakest point. They poured the most cruelty into the places they assumed would break the fastest. But sensitivity in a chosen one is not fragility, it is depth. And depth, under sustained pressure, does not shatter. It compresses into something that the very same forces which tried to destroy it can no longer penetrate. They brought the kind of pressure that is designed to break glass. What they found out was that they had been pressing against something that forms diamonds. You want resolution. You have waited. You have maintained your integrity while watching the people who wronged you appear to face no immediate consequence. And there have been days when that waiting felt like evidence that justice was simply not coming, that the situation would go unaddressed, that the people who operated against you would be allowed to keep operating indefinitely. Hear this clearly. The absence of visible movement is not the absence of movement. What is being assembled requires time, not because you are not a priority, but because a partial outcome would not be adequate. The objective is not to address a single incident in isolation. The objective is to document the full scope of what was done across every layer of the operation, from the people who executed it directly to the people who directed it from a distance. Building that comprehensively takes time, but what that process produces cannot be dismantled by a good lawyer or a well-timed retraction. It stands because it was built to stand. Every lie told during this period of apparent quiet has been making the case stronger, not weaker. Every attempt to delete records has added its own evidence to the file. Every person who distanced themselves from the central figures and offered their own self-protective account has in doing so corroborated exactly what investigators already suspected. The machinery of accountability has been running quietly in the background of your patience. You did not know it was running, but it has been running continuously. When you are eventually approached, and you may be, your role is not to perform. Your role is to be exactly what you have been throughout all of this: factual, grounded, and clear. You have the memory of real events. You have lived the actual sequence of what happened. You have nothing to fabricate and nothing to hide. Present the truth calmly and completely, and allow it to do what truth does when it is finally given an audience with the power to act on it. A calm, clear, organized account from someone who has been genuinely wronged but has not been destroyed is more damning than any emotional performance. You carry that account. You simply have to deliver it when the time comes. You have been in preparation for that moment without knowing it was preparation. Every day you chose integrity over retaliation was a day of preparation. Every day you stayed grounded when the pressure to react was real was a day of preparation. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be. The signs of what is coming are already visible to anyone paying close attention. The group that came against you is no longer unified. The person at the center is carrying a nervousness that no performance of confidence can fully mask. The evidence has been preserved. The financial dimension has been opened in a way that cannot be quietly closed again. The behavior pattern has been named with a legal name, and a named documented pattern in the hands of people authorized to act on it is no longer a private matter between you and the people who targeted you. What is approaching is not a rumor, and it is not a spiritual abstraction. It is a formal proceeding. It is accountability that arrives not because of how loudly you asked for it or how clearly you suffered, but because the record that was built against you was also inadvertently, carelessly, arrogantly a record built against the people who created it. Their own communications, their own documented activity, their own consistent behavior across the full scope of this campaign have produced the evidence that is now in use. Justice does not always arrive in a single dramatic public moment. Sometimes it moves through many channels simultaneously, through formal proceedings, through professional consequences, through the quiet revision of reputations as the truth reaches people who were previously operating on a false version of events. It moves through the collapse of coalitions, through the withdrawal of support, through the isolation of people who spent enormous energy engineering your isolation. What remains consistent across every form that justice takes is that it arrives. Organized cruelty against an innocent person always generates a reckoning. Too many people hold too many pieces of the real story. Those pieces find each other eventually, and when they do, the manufactured version cannot survive contact with what is actual. When the truth reaches the people who were turned against you, they will face a moment where the story they were given and the documented reality stand next to each other. That comparison will accomplish for your name what no amount of self-defense from you ever could have, because vindication that arrives from official, external confirmation carries a weight that no personal statement can match, and it is coming. The openness that existed then was openness without discernment. The trust was trust without full self-knowledge. The generosity sometimes flowed toward people who were not worthy of it, because you did not yet have the lived experience to recognize the difference between someone who wanted access to your light and someone who wanted to extinguish it. You had the gift. You simply had not yet learned to use it in full service of your own protection. That has changed. Every part of it has changed. The openness is still present, but it now arrives with the quiet authority of someone who knows exactly what they are offering and to whom the trust is still present, but it now requires people to demonstrate something real before you extend it. The generosity is still present, but it now moves toward people and places that can receive it without weaponizing it, and everyone else encounters a boundary that requires no justification and no apology. And the knowing that was always in you, the one that tried to speak and kept getting overridden because the truth it was pointing at felt too costly to face, you do not override it anymore. You have learned through the most demanding kind of lived experience that the knowing has never been wrong. It was right every single time you chose to ignore it. You simply were not yet ready to receive what it was telling you. You are ready now. A coordinated group came against you with confidence, believing that sustained pressure applied to the right vulnerabilities would eventually produce your collapse. A person was placed close to you to extract access and generate material for the campaign. Your name was carried into rooms where it did not belong, and a version of you was constructed in those rooms that bore no relationship to who you actually are. Your movements were monitored. Your private life was surveilled, long past any point that ordinary conflict could explain. And running through all of it was a financial dimension that moved everything from personal cruelty into something with legal weight and official consequence. What was done to you has been seen. The slandering of your character, every whisper, every manufactured narrative, every deliberate attempt to have other people view you through the lens of a lie, has been observed by eyes that have no personal stake in the outcome. The bullying, coordinated, sustained, multi-person targeting of one individual has been documented. The monitoring and digital surveillance that tracked your life long after any reasonable conflict would have ended has been logged and preserved. The financial element is in the hands of people whose entire function is to follow exactly that kind of evidence. The case is assembled. The reckoning is in motion. And when it arrives in whatever form, through whatever official channel, across whatever dimensions it moves, you will not need to perform your vindication. You will not need to make sure the right people are watching. You will already be somewhere ahead of it, already building, already living the life that the entire operation against you was designed to prevent. That is the transformation. That is the full arc. That is what chosen ones do with the wars declared against them. They do not simply survive the war, they emerge from it as someone. The person who started the war never had the vision to anticipate. The character assassination has been seen, the bullying has been documented, the gang stalking has been tracked, the investigation is real, and it is moving, and the person standing at the center of all of it, the one who was targeted, the one whose destruction was organized and celebrated prematurely, that person is you. You are still here. You are still standing. You are more powerful now than you were when any of this began. They chose the wrong person. The whole world is about to understand exactly why.